So you've gone out and you've met the kinky people at a munch, but now you want to get out to where all the really sexy stuff happens. Welcome to the world of private and semi-private parties. Let's talk about the difference between a semi-private and a private party, because there is a distinction and it is something that you should be aware of, because it will determine whether you can go in some cases, but also who else you can expect to have show up. Now, a semi-private party will be advertised, but on places that are really only accessible to kinky people. So for instance, FetLife is generally somewhere that anybody hosting any sort of kink party will advertise. They will be open to members of the kink community. Often you do need to be a vetted community member, and it'll often be hosted by, a group or an organization that specializes in BDSM, if it's an organization, or a group that does certain parties, or, sometimes it's individuals who just want to throw a party. Often they're done in commercial dungeon spaces. So it would not be my little home dungeon here, but it would be some of the bigger dungeons, often ones that pro-doms use during the day, will also be open to parties for the kink community in the evening. I have had play spaces that I've owned and run where we did the same thing. It was my workspace during the day. We did pro-dom work and video work during the day, and then evenings, weekends, we opened up to workshops and parties and that sort of thing. So that is a very common thing that happens. Sometimes different organizations will have a space of their own that will be just dedicated to education and parties that they throw. So that's also a possibility. A private party is pretty much what it says. It will be a party that is invite only. You won't find it advertised anywhere. Often it'll be guests that the host or hostess knows directly, and sometimes the guests of those guests. So if you have a friend that you want to bring, you can ask the host, and you would probably need to vouch for your friend, which means that you take responsibility for their actions for the night. So if they misbehave and act like a total jerk, well, you're also going to be held responsible, and both of you may not be asked back to future parties. So usually it'll happen in somebody's house. Often it'll be someone like myself where they have their own little dungeon room, or often people will have a basement if they actually own a home. They'll have the basement converted into a play space, that sort of thing, where they have some play equipment that they can open up to their friends that they trust, but they don't feel comfortable, obviously, opening their home to, just random community people. Sometimes people will rent out a commercial dungeon and have an invite-only party. That's absolutely something that happens. It does get a little pricey because commercial dungeons are rather expensive. Usually private parties are hosted by individuals or by groups and organizations who just want to have a private party. But usually you'll find that it is, an individual, and they may run a small group. I know that within my own community, there is a femdom group, and they host a private party. Well, it's more of a semi-private party, but you do need to be very thoroughly vetted in order to go, and it is in someone's private home. So, and it's a fantastic party. Just gonna throw that out there. It's a lot of fun to go to. But anyways, that is sort of the difference between a private and a semi-private party. So now you know which ones that you can just kind of sort of go to once you've been vetted, and which ones you need to wait for an invite to. So I'm going to quickly talk about vetting just very briefly here. I will do a whole video on the vetting process, which is different no matter where you go. But I'll give you an idea of what you can expect. Vetting often sounds like a really big deal or very kind of scary. It really isn't that big of a deal. It will, of course, depend on the vetting process that this particular person or group or whatever has in place. So vetting often happens at munches, which is why we're always telling you guys, go to a munch, because that's the first contact that you get with a lot of the kink community. And if you can't make a good first impression at a munch, then a lot of people will, I think justifiably, think that you will not make a good impression at a play party where there's all kinds of sexy stuff happening. So like, yeah, if you can't make it through a munch without, I think I was joking about masturbating under the table, so we'll use that as an example again. But if you can't make it out through a munch without masturbating under the table, then we know that you will not be able to, control yourself or behave appropriately for an actual play party where there may be naked people and there may be sex and there may be all of these things going on. So usually, I mean, that is a very extreme example, but usually what we are looking for is people want to see how you interact with others, how you treat the wait staff, how you just carry yourself in general. Are you standing too close to people? Are you asking inappropriate questions? Are you being really pushy? Like, how do you interact with people? So that's something that we're going to look for. You also need to build and maintain a reputation within the community. And so that would be part of the vetting process, is checking in and seeing what other people within the community think of you. Have you had interactions with this person? What do you think? When I have applied to teach at various conferences around both Canada and North America, one of the things they usually ask me for are references. And sometimes they don't ask me directly for the references. They contact people that they happen to know within my local community to ask about me. People they do check your references, and they check to see, how you interact within your local community if you are looking at going to some party or something that's outside of your regular sort of stomping grounds. So again, you may be asked for references, and if you are asked for references, it is really, really important that you let people know that you've given their name. You should really ideally ask them first. I would never give somebody as a reference without asking them beforehand. I am going to tell you a little bit of a funny story. We'll get sidetracked for a moment here. Somebody did give me as a reference that was not going to get a good reference from me. And it's sort of an odd situation. This person was a client of mine many, many years ago. And to the point that I had pretty much dismissed them as a client simply because their behavior was so poor. They would, show up without an appointment and expect to see me, which was an absolute no-no. They would insist on, getting an appointment sooner than I was able to. I had a rule of 24 hours notice before an appointment, and they would be like, "Oh, can I see you in half an hour?" And it's like, "No, you can't." And then they would be late, and they would just generally kind of be unpleasant, and they weren't very pleasant to deal with in a client sort of relationship. So this is a person that I would not see or play with even for money, and significant sums of money as well. But they, for some reason, thought that I would give a glowing review to this dominant woman that they had met within the community. So what ended up happening was this woman approached me and said, "Oh, do you know so-and-so?" And I don't like to let on if somebody's a client of mine or anything like that. And I didn't know that this person had been involved in the community at all. So I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure," And she said, "Well, let me tell you what happened. He said that he was a client of yours and he gave you as a reference when I was, chatting with him online and we were going to have a play date." And I said, "Oh, okay, yes, well, I do know him," because if she already knew the relationship, then that was fine. And she's like, "So I should have emailed you, and I didn't, because I just assumed that if he was giving you as a reference, then he was a decent person." And I said, "Oh, I had no idea that he gave me as a reference. I didn't even know that this was going to happen, and he wouldn't have gotten a good one." And she's like, "Yeah, I noticed, because I went and played with him, or she went on a date with him, or I don't know if they played or not, whatever, it doesn't matter. And he was horrible, right? He treated her very much the same way he was treating me, which was completely unacceptable." And she was like, and this is just like a lifestyle thing for her, she wasn't a pro or anything. And so, this was the thing. So she regretted not actually contacting me for the reference and learned a very valuable lesson there. And I got a laugh because I was like, why on earth would this person think that I would give them a good reference? Like, I wouldn't. And I thought I had made that rather clear to them when I dismissed them as a client and said that I will not see you for money. But anyways, that for me was a fun little side story. Anyways, let's get back to vetting. So, your references, if you do choose to give references, should always be asked first. And they should be somebody who is known to both people. Now, this could be somebody who is known by reputation. That is fine for some people, right? Sometimes when going to parties, as I mentioned in private parties, you might need somebody to vouch for you, to say like, oh, no, they're cool. It's okay. They're cool. Now that person will be taking responsibility for you. So if you behave poorly, it reflects on them and you, obviously. So you do want to keep that in mind. If somebody's vouched for you, you really, really should be on your absolute best behavior. You may only need somebody to vouch for you once. Some places will have, well, you know, in order to come in, we want you to sort of have somebody vouched for you a couple of times. So, like, you will be the responsibility of this guest for the first 3 times that you go to this party. And then after that, you become a vetted, cleared person who can then go to the party. So it really depends on the rules that that particular person or group has. You may be asked about experience and stuff like that. So just be honest with people. You know, you may be asked how many years you've been in the lifestyle, what other parties you've gone to, what community events you've gone to. And if you're new, just be honest. Be like, well, I'm just brand new to the BDSM community. I haven't had a chance to make it out to very much yet, but I did go to this munch, you know, and I'm just looking to get into the community at this point. And most people will be okay, and they'll figure out other ways that, you know, you can be vetted, or they'll tell you, well, you need to go to so many munches or whatever before, or you need to go to our group's munch, that's often a thing, before you're able to come to our group's party. So it's okay to be new, just be honest about it, and nobody will hold that against you, hopefully. Often you're going to be asked for your FetLife name so they can kind of check up how you behave online as well, because a lot of people will behave really poorly online, and that should be an indication of how they're going to behave in meet space. So, you know, don't be surprised if you're asked for a FetLife handle or other similar type things. So private parties usually will have more strict vetting than any other class of parties. Semi-private, they may or may not have vetting, and it probably won't be super, super strict, but that, again, it depends. Now, there are public parties, and I'm going to talk about that in another video, and public parties usually require absolutely no vetting. Anybody on the street can walk in and out, and, you know, that's fine. It's just a different type of party. So semi-private parties and private parties may or may not have a dress code. It's really up in the air, depends on the type of party. So you should always check first and make sure that you are going to be dressed appropriately. Generally, what is accepted is that you be, you know, street legal or follow the grandmother rule. Both of those basically just mean that you are dressed appropriately for public when you arrive and leave, or if you are in any spaces which are, you know, accessible to the public. So if you are, say, going outside to have a cigarette, you're going to have to cover up and not be in, you know, nude or in, like, you know, leather underwear or whatever it is. Just, it's for coming and going, and it's because, you know, these are often held in people's homes, and what are the neighbors going to think, right? So you do need to have respect for that. Nudity or partial nudity is generally pretty common if it's allowed at these parties. There are types of parties which are known as CFNM or CMNF, and that is clothed female, naked male, and the opposite of that, clothed male, naked female parties. And these are usually very high protocol parties. So usually at these parties, the people who are wearing clothing are the dominants. So at CFNM parties, those are femdom parties. And the people who are nude are the submissives. And they will have specific rules for that. Fetish wear is usually okay at any of these parties. Again, you just have to make sure that you, when you're coming and going, that you are dressed appropriately. You know, less of an issue in the winter when you can just throw on a big overcoat. a little harder to do in the summer, but often you can just change when you get there, and they'll have like a bathroom set aside or a room set aside for people to change if they need to. Often jeans and a t-shirt is okay as well for these parties, or whatever casual wear you want. So just check and make sure that you are, dressed appropriately for the party. So I did mention kind of high protocol in the context of CF&M parties and CMNF parties, which is a lot harder for me to say for some reason. I think just because I'm used to the first one. But there are other types of high protocol parties. So often femdom parties are usually high protocol, but there's all kinds of other ones, and it can run the gamut of any orientations. So there will be specific rules for guests. Usually those are different rules for the dominants versus the submissives, or whichever role you do fulfill. Often switches are told to pick one role for the evening and stick with it. But again, that can be different depending on the host of the party. Examples of some of these rules is that, like, the submissives are not allowed on the furniture, or the submissives are not allowed to wear clothing, or they have to use, everybody has to use titles, or whatever. So you'll have to check and see what those rules are for the specific party you're wanting to go to, because they are different across the board. There's no like standard set of rules for high protocol parties, and they're often more formal in dress than other parties, so they'll either want fetish wear or formal wear or whatever. So what you should expect at either a private party or a semi-private party, it's generally a more relaxed environment, unless of course it is a high protocol party, but usually it's more relaxed and just chill. Often you're going to see a lot more play and a lot more space dedicated to play than you would at a big club party. So that is, if you're wanting to play, this is the type of place that you should go to play. Usually the way it'll work is that there will be socializing areas and there will be play areas, and some parties, they don't want the two to mix. Others, some forms of play are okay in social areas, so like, foot massage is okay in the social area, whereas, using your single tail wouldn't be. But you'll have to check the specific rules for the party you want to go to. You'll often find a lot less formal play, so people that aren't doing like a big elaborate setup scene, just doing something like a foot massage or whatever. That's very common. You're going to get a really wide variety of ages, of shapes, sizes of people, everything, right? It's not just like a gathering of the pretty people or whatever, and it's not just a gathering of 20-somethings or whatever age group. You are going to see a huge age range generally, unless of course it's an age-restricted party. But usually we get people that are, 20 years old, and then we often will have, a person that is into their 60s, 70s, 80s. I don't think I've ever seen somebody older than 80 and change at a party, but you never know. I would be very impressed if somebody was older than that and still making it out to kink parties. Like, I hope to be that person one day, But you are going to see a huge range of people. You're also probably going to see more edge play. So edge play is things that are generally more dangerous. So you will see things like breath play or blood play or that kind of thing. Again, that really depends on the rules of the party. Some parties will have a no edge play rule. You are going to see usually more skilled play and not in the context of a demonstration. So you may see single tails being used, which is a highly skilled form of play. But it's not going to be a demonstration for everybody to consume. It's just going to be someone doing a scene. You may see, again, like, piercing, which is a more skilled form of play. And, you won't have it as a demo. It's just somebody having a scene. So that is usually happening at these types of parties. You won't always have, or you almost never will have a demo or specific entertainment for people. The party itself is the entertainment. You will also notice that there's a lot less drinking, if there's any allowed at all. Generally, most kink parties frown on booze because you shouldn't be playing under the influence. That's not always the case. To be honest with you, at femdom parties, I do see a lot more drinking than I do at sort of mixed group parties. But and I'm not sure if, you know, more male-oriented spaces have more drinking or not, because obviously I'm not going to those spaces. Often there's also food available, so like a nice little buffet of snacks or whatever. So that's quite nice. The music is going to be much lower, so you'll be able to have a conversation, and instead of like at a club where it's like super loud and you have to scream. And you're going to get more conversation and people talking and that sort of stuff. The important thing when you go to any of these parties is not to go with a set of expectations that are unrealistic. So unless you have made plans before the party, do not expect to play and do not expect to get laid. You should not expect those things ever until, you know, like unless you've prearranged that. But even then, people sometimes have reasons to back out. You know, if they get to the party and they're not feeling well, sorry, the play isn't going to happen. But don't expect those things. Going to a party does not guarantee that you are going to play or have sex. You also shouldn't expect to see like some crazy movie atmosphere where like it's this huge elaborate dungeon and all the people are head to toe in latex and everything else. You know, you might see something similar to that at a club party, but at a private party in someone's home, you're not going to get that kind of environment. Now, in my opinion, I prefer the semi-private and private parties because at this point in my life, I'm much more interested in, you know, socializing and playing than I am with drinking and dancing. That happens a lot more at the big club events. I still go to some of the big club events because they are fun occasionally, and I often will be performing at them. I do work as a performance artist occasionally, doing sideshow stunts and hook suspensions. So I do get hired to do some of these big parties sometimes, which is nice. But they're not my cup of tea all the time. I'm not a drinker and I don't really like loud noises. So when I was younger, I used to go to club parties all the time and they were awesome. And like I said, I still go occasionally and they can be fun, but they're not my every weekend sort of thing. But anyways, I hope that that helps clear up some ideas that you may have had regarding play parties, both private and semi-private. And if you have not gone out to one, please, you know, go out, have some fun, and hopefully now you know what to expect, and you won't be too surprised, and you know how some of the etiquette works. I'm going to have a whole bunch of videos on parties, so, you know, addressing little different parts, but I just wanted to clear up the different types of parties. So anyways, I will be posting one on club parties, fetish parties very soon, so don't forget to check that one out. And thank you very much for watching this video, which ended up being a bit longer than I expected. So if you haven't done so already, subscribe. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next video.